Donkey Kong Country was developed by Rare and released in 1994 on the Super Nintendo. This was the first Donkey Kong game not directed or produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, the series creator. Initially working on a boxing demo that demonstrated their new pre-rendered 3D graphics, Rare impressed Nintendo and managed to strike a deal as a second-party developer, with permission to create a new Donkey Kong entry. Rare assembled their largest team yet at 20 members, and after 18 months of hard work, Donkey Kong Country was released to critical acclaim, selling 6 million units during its first holiday season and setting a record for the fastest-selling game of all time. It was even listed in Time magazine's top 10 best products of 1994, the only video game to be put on the list. The title went on to be a pack-in game for the Super Nintendo, which helped to keep the console's sales up during the release of the PlayStation, and wound up as the third best-selling title of all time on the Super Nintendo. With such a classic on our hands, it's important to ask, what's so great about Donkey Kong Country? Welcome to Donkey Kong Island, home of the Kongs. But these aren't the Kongs you're used to from the arcade cabinet. Rare decided it was time to introduce a new generation of Nintendo primates. The story features a brand new Donkey Kong and his nephew Diddy Kong. Donkey Kong wakes up the night after a terrible storm to find his banana horde kidnapped by the Kremlings, reptilian marauders of Donkey Kong Island. Donkey Kong finds his nephew shoved inside a nearby barrel by the foes, and the two set off on an adventure of vengeance to find the thief of their prized banana collection, following the trail left behind. This Donkey Kong is in fact the grandson of the arcade cabinet DK, who is also in the game, but is now known as Cranky Kong. Whenever visiting Cranky's cabin, the old ape will rant about how video games were much better in his day, citing frame and color limitations as working with what they had. Aside from his fourth wall breaking brand of humor, Cranky Kong also supplies Donkey and Diddy with hints along their journey. On their adventure, they also come across their friends Funky Kong, who will offer transport to any previous level, and Candy Kong, who will allow the main duo to save their progress throughout the game. The story is beyond simple, but for this game there's nothing wrong with that. It was a complete departure from the previous Donkey Kong games. With the help of their friends, Donkey and Diddy have the honor of the first Donkey Kong game with a full narrative as they track down the criminal mastermind King K. Rool and reclaim their island. The gameplay of Donkey Kong Country is based around the premise of basic controls that require a hefty amount of player thought to utilize to its fullest potential. Let's cover the basics first. The game features both single-player and multiplayer, hosting a co-op mode and contest mode, comparable to two-player mode in Super Mario Bros. 3. The player controls one of the two Kong characters. The difference between Donkey Kong Country and many platformers at this time is that you have either the option or restriction of playing as either Kong, both having their own traits that may help or hinder you depending on your situation. Donkey Kong is stronger, capable of both a ground pound technique and a more powerful jump to take out stronger enemies. Diddy, on the other hand, is more nimble, aiding you in long jumps or tricky maneuvers around enemies. Each world in Donkey Kong Country has a theme, but the mechanics and aspects of the levels change on a regular basis within the worlds to mix things up, with rope swinging, barrel launching, and minecart riding levels, all of which require very different uses of platforming and timing to navigate obstacles. On your way through each level, you have the opportunity to collect multiple types of objects, such as bananas and extra life balloons, to give you a buffer against failing the world and starting over. But these collectibles are just bonuses, not requirements. In a very welcome nature that is lost among the majority of games, you aren't punished for doing poorly in Donkey Kong Country. After all, not progressing through the game is punishment enough. Instead, you simply miss out on the rewards you would get if you excelled in your gaming abilities. The difficulty curve is perfectly scaled to match the progression of the player's understanding of the game mechanics. Enemies start simply in early levels, generally walking back and forth with the occasional enemy that fires projectiles or has a specific requirement to defeat. Later on, levels are completely full of these enemies, as well as baddies that can't be defeated and have to be avoided altogether once you've already established how to approach different enemy types. Now that we've discussed the great mechanics of the game, let's look at how player thought comes into all of this. Games that teach their players as well as Donkey Kong Country are few and far between. As soon as you leave Donkey Kong's house, you understand the animals around you are threats. The developers chose obviously dangerous animals such as wasps, snakes, and piranhas to demonstrate who the enemies are without confusion. Even the way different animals approach you helps the player to understand how they need to be attacked. Less threatening animals can be rolled into, but snakes are low and therefore have to be jumped on. Armadillos curl up into their shell, so your roll will have no effect on them either. And the fact that you have limited mobility and action underwater encourages you to stay away from fish and sharks altogether. Also taught within the first stage is the purpose of the DK barrels. The first one lies directly in your path and shows its purpose by bringing your partner into play. Each mechanic of the game is presented to you either through demonstration or implicit hinting within the first few levels. The game doesn't want you to fail, but that doesn't mean it'll give you everything for free. As long as you keep an eye out, the hints towards secret bonuses are very well presented. Secret locations to find typically fall right into your path, but are disguised enough to be missed if you aren't thinking. For instance, when the player first accesses Rambi the Rhino in the first stage, simply running in a straight line will open up 2 secret areas, demonstrating not only the function of your Rhino pal, but also the existence of breakable walls without having to say a word about it. Not everything is handed to you, so you're going to have to think about your surroundings. Sometimes the game hints at where secrets are, but other times it will intentionally lead you away from bonuses with the allure of bananas and arrows that may trick you out of an extra life. Thinking about what's just off screen will give any player a major advantage in any stage. Any mechanic not taught within the first few stages is still taught within a safe environment before being compiled into a challenge. The game frequently provides you with either an extra life or a partner barrel before introducing something that can harm you. Some items are put just out of range in the early levels to show you that there are mechanics that you haven't learned yet, encouraging you to think about how it may be reached. Sometimes the hints provided by Cranky Kong contain the answers to a question from the level you just played, and returning with your new knowledge will give you an extra boost. If you ask Donkey Kong fans what stands out most in Donkey Kong Country, the most common answer you'll get is the visuals, and there's good reason for it. Donkey Kong Country was one of the first home games to use pre-rendered 3D graphics. This new style stood out from the other 16-bit games of the console, and while they are visibly dated for coming out almost 23 years ago, that doesn't stop them from holding up well to this day. The game was awarded Best Graphic Achievement at the 1994 Consumer Electronics Show, and Rareware's redesign of the titular ape has certainly stood the test of time, being used for every 3D reappearance since then with very limited changes. The sound design has also remained a huge point of interest in older fans and new players. The music was mostly composed by David Wise, who was the sole musician at Rareware from 1985 to 1994, and you might have recognized more of his music recently if you played the new Playtonic Games release, Yooka-Laylee. Wise used his experiences with traveling around the world to design music and sounds that would fit different environments depending on where the Kongs were exploring, so that the music and sounds could reflect the vast variations between snowy mountains and coral reefs. Wise also cited Koji Kondo's work and 80s dance music as substantial inspirations of his compositions. Beyond the music, sound effects provide a clear and satisfying amount of detail to the world you are tumbling through. One of the best examples of their attention to sound effects that may be overlooked is the fact that depending on who you're in control of at the time of reaching a partner barrel, you will hear specific noises depending on which Kong is stuck inside. Low grunts for Donkey and high screeches for Diddy. Rareware knew how stark of a difference they were creating with this game, not only in its own series but within games of that time frame as a whole. The moment the game starts up, you're greeted by a cutscene of Cranky Kong, standing on top of the iconic arcade girders and playing an old chiptune melody on his phonograph, before Donkey Kong drops in with a vibrant background and his boombox, blasting a brand new style of music, all of which says, "Get ready, we're moving this into a new age of gaming." And that's exactly what they did. Looking at the surface of this game, it could appear that it was set for financial failure. There's no spectacular gimmick or revolutionary mechanics to differentiate it from its competitors. It looks like just another platformer on the Super Nintendo. So, what's so great about Donkey Kong Country? In the golden era of platforming games, Rareware took on the task of creating a new game from an old idea to stand out against all of the rest that would make Nintendo themselves proud. And not only did they accomplish that, but they created a game that would remain a favorite of platforming players for years to come. From the basic gameplay to the turn of the millennium graphics, every piece of Donkey Kong Country fits together to create a nearly impeccable Super Nintendo adventure. It's difficult to exclude any type of person from the intended audience of this game. It's a simple, well-developed game that presents an entertaining experience with optional completionist challenges for the more persistent players. From completely unrelated source material, Rare was able to take on a well-known Nintendo property and breathe new life into it, creating an instant classic on the Super Nintendo. That is what's so great about Donkey Kong Country. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we swung through the world of Donkey Kong. If you have a favorite series or single game that you think is great, leave a comment of your choice and we'll look into it. We'd like to thank Furio Franjean for the Donkey Kong suggestion. If you feel there's something else in the Donkey Kong series that needs to be addressed, let us know. We'd love to discuss it with you. By the way, if you want to keep up with updates or hints about upcoming episodes, you can find us on Twitter at WSGA Gaming. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.